and underline. I love underlining, so that's a definitely con. But it's nice to have the text right there. You just click on it, and it goes right to the text. So to those who have a quarterly, you are lucky, fortunate. Okay, so today is, what is today? Happy Great Disappointment Day, huh? October 22nd. What does that mean to us as Adventists? October 22nd, 1844. What happened to that day, huh? Ascension Rock. A lot of Adventists in the morning of October 22nd, upset for days, right? Weren't prepared. They left their potatoes in the field, left their jobs, because they thought Jesus was going to come on October 22nd, 1844, 170 some years ago. Obviously, the fulfillment of the 2300 day prophecy. It wasn't the earthly sanctuary, was it? What sanctuary was it? The heavenly sanctuary. Absolutely right. The heavenly sanctuary. And Jesus moving into the holy place and beginning the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary. If everybody remembers, the once a year on the Day of Atonement, which happened to be October 22nd that year, 1844, the high priest would move it into the most holy place, cleanse the sanctuary. It's called the Day of Atonement, put the sins upon the goats, and the goat would go out. So figuratively, that's what Jesus is doing right now. And that was figurative. Jesus is doing now literally is he's cleansing the temple in the sanctuary in heaven. And what he's doing, he's going through all the names of the book of life. Either taking them out or he's leaving them on there. Which ones are we going to be, 170 some years ago. But Revelation 22:12 says, all will be rewarded according to their works. And so hopefully our works come from our heart, right? Because we're not saved by our works, but they're the fruit of what lives inside of us, right? The fruit of the Spirit. Okay, so let's turn to the, open up our quarterlies, those who have them, the Sabbath lesson. So not today, but this week's lesson is called the Old Testament Hope. And I love studying the Old Testament just as much as the New Testament, maybe even more, not just because of the stories, but the metaphors, the allegories, and how the New Testament kind of fulfilled all that stuff. But it's really cool to study prophecies and the metaphors of Jesus coming and the first time around and what he's doing for us now. So let's look at our Sabbath school lesson. See, I'm going to start reading. Somebody have it? Maybe read the second paragraph there. It starts with the first paragraph, after the memory text. It starts with the Old Testament hope. Anybody have you guys have, ladies have mics? Now we need to. I know Esther's talkative up here too. Okay, hey Esther, I know you have a microphone. Oh, you don't have one? Uh-oh. We got you. There should be just a little button there. Yep. Okay. Esther, could you read that, please? It starts with the Old Testament hope.
The Old Testament hope is grounded not on Greek ideas, but on natural immortality of the soul, but on the biblical teaching of the final resurrection of the dead. But how could a no longer existent human body, cremated into ashes or destroyed by other means, be brought to life again? How can someone who has been deceased, perhaps for centuries or even millennia, recover again his or her identity?
Yes. So we're going to be looking at the Old Testament as far as resurrection, the death and resurrection there. Obviously, there's hundreds of examples in the New Testament where it talks about the resurrection and death and falling asleep. But in the Old Testament, obviously there's death there, but where is the hope? Where is the resurrection in the Old Testament? The next paragraph says, these questions lead us to reflect on the mystery of life. We are alive and enjoy the life that God graciously grants us every day. I'm thankful to be alive. I'm thankful to have a family. I'm thankful to have health. But at the same time, I'm not thankful so much to God for what we have. But I'm also weary. I'm tired. I'm ready to go home. And so you could just imagine October 22nd, 1844 just exacerbated that, right? They gave up everything. They left everything, all of their fields, whatever, the farmers. All their hopes was on that night, on that morning, that Jesus would come. And finally, this earth would be just done with. They'd be living in heaven. But our work is not done, right? We got to keep working. Tired or weary or not, we've got to keep working. There's people out there that don't know the truth. And back then, 170 years ago, many people didn't know the truth. Many areas, areas of this country even. And so that is what our job is now, is to bring to light and give people the hope that we have. Tell people about the hope that we have. Let's see. Let's go to Old Testament hope resurrection. Remember. So let's look at the memory verse here. It says, by faith Abraham, memory verse of the week. By faith Abraham, when put to the test, offered up Isaac, he who had received the promises, ready to offer up his only son. He considered the fact that God is able even to raise someone from the dead. And figuratively speaking, he did receive him back. You know, I wish, when I first started studying this lesson for the week, I thought they were going to focus a whole day on that verse, and I wish they had. But unfortunately, that's the only time this is mentioned here. There's about Hebrews 11, 17, and 19. There's so much in that verse to unpack. Number one, obviously, the resurrection was believed back then, back in Abraham's time. And you want to be honest about it. I mean, it really started back in Genesis 3, right? Where God promised that, hey, he's telling the serpent, Jesus was going to destroy your head, but you will bruise his heel, right? So Abraham knew about the resurrection among the other Old Testament figures. We're going to look at the book of Job right now. What was the first book of the Bible that was actually written? It was Job, right? Moses wrote the book of Job before he wrote the book of Genesis. So Job was the first book written, and we're going to read here very soon. In fact, we're going to read it right now, going to Sunday's lesson about Job and how he knew about the resurrection, how he knew there was hope, and especially in his life, right? We know Job's story of unfairness. He was blameless. I think the very first verse of Job says, you know, he was blameless in front of God. And so Satan says, well, let's take a look at this. Take a look at this guy right here. So obviously he lost his livestock, he lost possessions, he lost his children, his health was going crazy, he had sores, and but he was still blameless. So let's read here. Honey, if you want to read, Job did not realize.
Job did not realize that he had become the epic center of a deep cosmic struggle between God and Satan.
Right there. Job did not realize to become the epicenter of a deep cosmic struggle between God and Satan. You know, it's meaningless. No, I should say meaningless, but as maybe we live our lives thinking, you know what, nobody's noticing us. I mean, I go to the grocery store a couple times a week, you know, some of us are retired, so, you know, I'll go and rake the leaves or something. Who knows about me? You know, who knows the struggles, and we all have struggles. Doesn't matter how old we are or who we are. Sometimes we'll tell ourselves, does anybody really notice? Maybe we're the epicenter of a deep cosmic struggle between God and Satan. I mean, maybe there are other worlds that are watching us about that subject. So let's go to...
But people are paying attention to what you are doing. I was at work this last week, and I was just reading Mark Finley's book, The Hope book. And one of my coworkers was like, Amy, what is that book that you're reading? Like, I was sitting at the nurse's station. I was like, oh, do you want to see it? She's like, yeah. So she kind of skimmed it. She's like, well, let me know when you're done with that, because I actually want a copy. And she's not an Adventist. She's a single woman, probably mid-40s, mid-50s. She's so sweet to me. Every night she's like, hey, how you doing? How's your family? Whatever. But she wants to learn more about what God is saying. Mm. And so I actually finished that book that night, because I always just take a book to study with me when I'm at work and I have downtime. So I actually gave it to her, And like literally the next night I saw her, she's like, Amy, that's such an amazing book. Thank you so much for sharing it with me. And she wants to know more about the books. She wants more books. So she asked me if I could bring her more books this following week.
So there are people who feel, you know what is my life right now,
Yep.
man, you know?
And that's what she's searching.
People are noticing.
Yeah, and she's searching for answers.
Yeah. And reading from the Ellen White notes here, it says, all heaven, this is Mrs. Wright writing, all heaven has the deepest interest in our welfare, that Satan shall not control us and conform us to his character. You know, heaven knows what Satan is like. Heaven knows what Lucifer was like. And they're looking at us like, boneheads, can't you guys see it? Why are you falling for this? Temptations, all the way from the fruit of the tree to whatever it is we're doing now. They know what Satan is like. They know how Lucifer was. And so they're interested in our welfare. They're seeing what we're doing. So we are the epicenter of a deep cosmic struggle between God and Satan. So I'm going to continue reading in that passage there in the lesson. It says, yet his unconditional faithfulness to God, I'm reading from the Quarterly, is well expressed in the words, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. So we're trying to bring the death, resurrection into Job's life. Job lost his children, right? He was thinking, man, how in the world is there hope in my life right now? He says, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Can we trust God in that same way? Can we trust God to raise our children? I mean, there's going to be a time, folks, when, well, let me go back. Last year at school, we were reading through this book. It was a true story based on the Huguenots back in the 1500s. And it was French folk who were being persecuted, Christians, Protestants, and the Catholic Church was persecuting them. And there were some, wow, I almost lost it a couple times as I was reading it, because it was basically children being murdered in front of their parents unless they recanted their Protestant faith, their Christian faith. Unless they gave in to the Catholic ways, they would take it out on their children. How many of us could do that? I mean, we have to have that trust. Though he slay us, yet we will trust in him. I think of John chapter 6. If you could look that up, Sandra. John chapter 6, verse 66 and 67, as we're talking about trust. Because I'm telling you, folks, if God doesn't raise us from the dead, doesn't raise us from the dead, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And this is what I'm in John chapter 6, verse 66 and 67. Sandra, if you could read that.
Okay. But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. That's not?
That's not it. That's correct. Okay, well, I'll go and read it. Actually, it starts in verse 67, 68. I may have told you wrong. Yeah, 67, chapter 6, verse 67 and 68.
57 and 58?
67 and 68.
67. Okay. Then Jesus said to the 12, do you also want to go away? But Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life.
Where are we going to go? I mean, our only hope is the resurrection, the patriarchs and the prophets in the Bible, and all the people who were murdered in the mid-dark ages, and even now as Christians going into this time. I mean, to where are we going to go? The resurrection is our only hope. We're all going to die, I mean, at some point, unless Jesus returns. But what is our hope? I mean, what other faith is there out there? There is nothing. Peter said to, where else are we going to go, Lord? You're our only hope. Let's turn to Job chapter 19, verse 25. You want to read that, babe?
Yeah. For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth.
27.
You did not. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself and mine. I shall behold and not another, through my reins be consumed within me.
Okay, so verse 25 says, for I know that my Redeemer liveth, and he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. Job knew about this coming of Christ. Now, whether he was talking about the first coming or the second coming, we don't know. But he knew that there was going to be a hope, a resurrection. He knew that though he slay me, yet will I trust him, because Jesus will come back in the latter day. He knew about it. I'm going to read it from the E.G. White notes. The doctrine of the second Advent is the very, very keynote of the sacred scriptures. Let me read that again. The doctrine of the second Advent is the very keynote of the sacred scriptures. In other words, it's the theme, it's the glue holding on together. It's the I have the word epicenter in my head still. Epicenter of the Bible, of the scriptures. It's the very keynote. And what is that? The second Advent, the second coming. From the day when the first pair turned their sorrowing steps from Eden, the children of faith have waited the coming of the promised one to break the destroyer's power and bring them again to the lost paradise. So the second coming, the resurrection, is the theme of the Bible. And of course, Jesus is that way for us to be able to be part of that resurrection and to look forward to that second coming. Jesus, it's all about Jesus and his coming. I'm going to read here, if you don't mind reading Esther in the quarterly. I think you have it quarterly, where it starts with the doctrine. Even imagining, I'm sorry. Yeah, even imagining, yeah. Oh, it's in the middle of the paragraph. Starts even imagining.
Even imagining that soon his life would end, he kept his assurance that death would not have the final word. With strong conviction, he stated that although he would die, his Redeemer would one day stand up, and he, Job himself, would see God in his own flesh.
He knew about it. Job absolutely knew about a resurrection. He knew about a coming. He knew that there was hope. He knew that even though things were falling apart around him, and the only one that didn't die was his wife, his loving, caring wife, right? And his friends who just kept chiding him, that he still had the hope of a resurrection for his kids. If anybody wants to say anything, I mean, just pop right in and say something. I'm just going to keep talking until someone says, hey, I got something to say. That's normally how I work at school, too. I got to get these words out of the kids, like, hey, guys, say something. Come on, guys. Okay, so let's turn to Monday's lesson. Psalm 49. Let's see. There at the top, at the quarterly, it says, what led the psalmist to be so sure of his final resurrection? So now we're talking about David. What led, and who wrote Psalm 49, what led the psalmist to be so sure of his final resurrection in contrast to those who perished without that assurance? So in Psalm 49, I don't know if any of you all are familiar with it, but there's a contrast between those who believe and have that hope of resurrection, and then those who don't. And we're going to look into it, starting with verse 6. If everybody could turn in your Bibles, that'd be great, to Psalm chapter 49, everybody, because I would, actually, you know what? I misspoke. Sandra, let me have you look up Mark chapter 4:19. Alan, could I have you look up Acts chapter 4, verse 12? Deborah, do you have a Bible? Yes. Okay. Could I have you look up Matthew chapter 20, verse 25? Esther, could I have you look up Luke chapter 12, verse 18? And do you have a microphone? No? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, we can share, right?
Here's another one.
Okay, there we go.
Here's,
And 2 Samuel 18:18. And Madeline, if I could have you look up Hebrews 11:35. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from this psalm. I'm just going to read like a verse at a time, kind of talk about it, and then the verse that you all have will kind of expound on it. I just looked up these verses and kind of trying to tie things together, maybe give a little more depth or clarity from other parts of the Bible. So look, I'm going to read from the NIV version, FYI. I was comparing versions and on this passage, and I tend to like this more. Honey, did you want to read Psalm chapter 49? No, not that version, though. I'll tell you what, I'll read it. Okay, chapter 49. I'm going to start with verse 5. I'm going to read verse 5 and 6. And then whoever has Mark 4:19, they can read that. Psalm 49, 5 and 6. So once again, remember, David is comparing those who are not believers, who are the wicked, with those who are, and then the hope of a resurrection, a second coming. Okay, so verse 5 and 6. Why should I fear when evil days come, when wicked deceivers surround me? Those who trust in their wealth and boast of the great riches. Mark chapter 4:19.
Right? You said?
Yes. Yes,
And the
ma'am.
cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the desires for other things, entering in and choking the word, and it becomes unfruitful.
It chokes the word and it becomes unfruitful. So when people trust in the wealth and the riches, when I talk about wealth, we're not just, because this passage in Psalm 49 talks a little bit about wealth, but I'm going to talk about not just monetary. I'm going to talk about looks. I mean, some people are just more handsome and prettier than others, right? I mean, it is what it is. So wealth and looks, but what about wealth and talents? Maybe you have many talents.Maybe you can play the trumpet and you can drive and you drive at the same time. I don't know, not drive, but play the trumpet, or you can have I don't know, all kinds of abilities, physical abilities. You can run fast, you can jump high, you can dunk a basketball. Then there's also wealth in I don't know,
your belongings.
possessions. There you go, property. So there's all kinds of wealth out there. And so when we talk about wealth, we're not going to just talk about money. We're going to talk about all kinds of wealth, possessions. We're going to talk about looks. We're going to talk about talents. Okay, verse 7. Verse 7. No one can redeem the life of another or give to God a ransom for them. So David is saying, those who trust in the wealth and boast of the great riches of verse 6, he says, verse 7, no one can redeem the life of another or give to God a ransom for them. That's interesting. Those who trust in the riches, God can't give them a ransom. Okay, now what does Acts chapter 4 say? I think that's you, Alan.
4:12.
Yes, sir.
There is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by whom we must be saved.
Yeah, and Matthew chapter 20, verse 25. Who has that one? Go ahead, Deborah. 25 through 27.
But Jesus called them unto them and said, Ye know that the prince of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be among you, but whoever so will be great among you, let him be your minister. And whoever will be a chief among you, let him be your servant.
And that's verse 27? Yes. Okay. Yeah, and so Jesus also says that, it goes on as saying that he gave his life a ransom for many, right? So the wicked who don't trust in God have the possessions, have the wealth, have the good looks, have the talents, but they're trusting in their own thing. Jesus is our ransom. Yes.
I was looking at that verse 7 in Psalm 49 again. It says, nor give to God a ransom. And that's and there's a church that wants you to pay
Absolutely.
to give
That's a good
somebody
point.
out of purgatory.
Yes, or to give God. They're trying to pay God off
Yeah.
for their salvation. Who can do that? Who's got enough money to buy their own salvation? Does Bill Gates? I mean, does a guy who owns Amazon, what's his name? Elon, or not, he doesn't own it, but yeah, somebody else. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. I mean, Bezos. Yeah, I mean, who can buy salvation? No one. It's free. Yes, Sandra.
But we have Matthew 6:33.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead and recite it.
Seek ye first the kingdom of
Aye,
God
amen.
and his righteousness.
All these things shall be added unto you. Yes, absolutely. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. And so, yes, people are trusting in their own works, their own wealth, their own possessions, their own talents, their own looks, trying to buy their salvation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here coming up soon. That's a very good point, Esther. I failed to miss that one. Verse 10, I'm going to skip down to verse 10. For all that can see that the wise die, that the foolish and the senseless also perish, leaving their wealth to others. So not only are they not able to pay God off for their salvation, or some God off, whether it's a real God or whether it's Buddha or whoever it is, but on top of that, their wealth, when they die, who does it go to? It goes to somebody else? Maybe their kids, maybe the state, maybe who knows? Maybe their ex-wife, who knows? Wives, ex-wives, depending on how they lived. So if we look at 2 Samuel 18:18, Madeline.
She had Hebrew.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who had 2 Samuel 18:18? Was that? Okay, no problem. I'll look it up. No, you're good. Okay, during his lifetime, now this is talking about Absalom. During his lifetime, Absalom had taken a pillar and erected it in the king's valley as a monument to himself. For he thought, I have no son to carry on the memory of my name. He named the pillar after himself, as it is called Absalom's monument to this day. Is it called Absalom's monument to this day? People are building things for themselves, right? We have the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's got their names on there. Hey, don't forget about me, guys. Remember, I used to be great. I was great. I was in the silent movies in the 20s and 30s, which, by the way, I love silent movies. I don't like CGI very much, computer graphics. And so I enjoy watching the simpler movies and the tricks they used to do with the cameras. Americana back then. So I don't like them per se, the actors so much themselves, but I appreciate everything else about the movie. But anyway, but the Hollywood, the people, I mean, they have their names everywhere. They have statues built, all over the world, saying, hey, don't forget about me, don't forget about me. Absalom, he had built a pillar back then before he died because he didn't have any seed, and so he's like, you know what? I want people to remember me. Well, where's the statue at, guys? No idea. So the point is going back to, let me flip back to, I lost my place, Psalm 49. That the wise die, the foolish and the senseless also perish, leaving their wealth to others. Their tombs will remain in their houses forever, their dwellings for endless generations, so they had named lands after themselves. But they die and that's it. Not only do they cannot buy God off, but they can also, there's not going to be anybody who's going to remember them. I remember when I was a kid, my dad was an Adventist pastor for a long time. And when I was 6 or 7 years old, he was doing a prophecy lecture. And there was one magazine that kind of stuck out of my mind, and it still does to this day. Well, it was a Amazing Facts brochure. It was a part of a set. And maybe y'all remember. They don't do it. I don't think they have it anymore. They've changed it since then. This is back in the 80s. But it was a picture of a cemetery marker and a military helmet on it and a gun stuck, like a M16 or something stuck in the ground. I don't know if anybody remember that. Black and white photo. And it says, buried and forgotten by God. Buried and forgotten. As a 6-year-old, I looked at that. I'm thinking, oh, man, that's powerful. I don't want to be forgotten. I knew back then, I was like, wow, I'm too young. I'm not going to die anyway, not anytime soon, I don't think. But to be forgotten by God, that really, and even then to this day, it sticks to me. I do not want to be forgotten. Hollywood tries to make themselves not forgotten. They'll be forgotten. In fact, they probably are. Not by man, but by God. And man, that is something that I do not want to be a part of. But then again, Hollywood are the ones that have the money. They have the looks. They have the talents, right? What do God's people look like? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, there's a psalm that says, how precious is the death of his pious ones. So there's a difference between the world. They get what they want right now, but there's a remembrance for those who are a long-lasting remembrance for those who are in him.
Yeah, Jesus says they have their reward. They have it right now. They're living it. They have no need for salvation, right? At least not at this point until they're about ready to die. But at this point, they're not. There's no need of salvation. They're living their life. They've got it made. So the question was that I asked a minute ago is, what do God's people look like? Are we handsome, beautiful, wealthy? I have rust in my cars, guys. I don't know about you guys, but every one of my cars has a dent and rust.
Or a dent.
It's okay. I'm good with it. It takes me from point A to point B, and I'm going to keep driving that 170,000 mile vehicle until the wheels fall off. And then a couple of the cars I have. And I'll just grab another one and keep going. But what do God's people look like? I'm going to read from Ellen White's notes here, page 31. This is on page 31 from here. From garrets, from hovels, from dungeons, from scaffolds, from mountains and deserts, from the caves of the earth and the caverns of the sea, Christ will gather his children to himself. On earth they have been destitute. This is what we look like. On earth they have been destitute, afflicted, tormented. Millions have gone down to the grave loaded with infamy because they refused to yield to the deceptive claims of Satan. By human tribunals, the children of God have been adjudged the vilest criminals. But the day is near when God to judge himself. Then the decisions of earth shall be reversed. The rebuke of his people shall he take away. White robes shall be given to every one of them, and they shall call them the holy people, the redeemed of the Lord. Guys, from Christ Object Lessons, page 179. What was it in Hebrews 11, where it says let me just look it up right quick. Where it says, others who were tortured, refusing to be released that they might gain a better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They were clothed in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, mistreated. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. But the world was not worthy of them. We're looking for a better hope. There's something better than having a star on the sidewalk. There's something better than driving around in a 2023 car. There's something better than being the most handsome, beautiful person in Evansville. There's something better, and that's our hope. Our hope is that we're not looking to be part of this world. We're just going back to the Pilgrims in 1844. We're just going through this world. We're not trying to be attached to anything. We're just trying to get through it, telling others about Jesus as we go along, because that's our mission, and waiting for Christ's coming. We have the exact same hope that Job had and that David had up to this point of what we're studying. Okay, now I'm going to read going back to Psalm verse 49. I'm going to continue reading on there, verse 12. People, despite their wealth, do not endure. They are like beasts that perish. This is the fate of those who trust in themselves and other followers who prove their sayings. They are like sheep and are destined to die. Death will be their shepherd. Death will be their shepherd. But the upright will prevail over them in the morning. Death will be their shepherd. How depressing. Ugh. They don't know it, right? They're living the life. They're great. They're good. Death will be their shepherd. I flip over here to Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, right? I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. Though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'm great, guys. I don't have to have all that stuff. I don't have to be the best looking person in Evansville. I don't have to have this or that or be the most talented. All I know is I walk with God and I'm good. I have that hope, and I hope you all do too, right? Hopefully we all have that hope. And then with that mindset, does the things of this world really matter? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So now we're going to go on the flip side, back to Psalm 49, but now David was talking about the ones who don't believe, but he left one verse for those who do, and that's verse 15. He talks about himself. He says, but God will redeem me from the realm of the dead. He will surely take me to himself. Did David believe in the resurrection? Absolutely he did. He had that hope. And David's life wasn't free from scandal and from sin, that's for sure. But nevertheless, at the end, he said, God will redeem me from the realm of the dead. He will surely take me to himself. Who is our shepherd today, huh? Is it death, like we read in verses 12 to 14, or is it the Lord? I'm going to read here from E.G. White notes, Christ, let's see where it says here. Christ claims all those as his who have believed in his name. The vitalizing power of the Spirit of Christ dwelling in the mortal body binds every believing soul to Jesus Christ. Those who believe in Jesus are sacred to his heart, for their life is hid with Christ in God. The command will come from the life giver. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in dust. The resurrection, right? For thy dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. By the power of the Savior that dwelt in them while living, and because they were partakers of the divine nature, they are brought forth from the dead. There's some things in life that just cannot be bought. Some things in life that cannot be given by someone's authority. But as long as we believe in Jesus, as long as we're following him and learning more of him, I mean, that's all that matters in this life. Let's turn to Tuesday's lesson. I want to ask you guys a question. Can I ask you all a question? And this is just a observation. But it seems to me the musicians, the ones who are really write music, not really play music so much, but write music, write lyrics, they seem awfully depressed, don't they? Seems like. I was looking it up. I just Googled, said, are musicians depressed? This is where I looked up. And the first website that came up here says, according to a survey on music, actually, when I typed that in, are musicians depressed? The answer came back from Google, yes. And then it gave a website to look up. So this is the first website. It said, according to a survey on music and mental health by Help Musicians UK, United Kingdom, of the 2,000 musicians interviewed, 71% experience anxiety and 68% deal with depression. Are musicians depressed? I used to room, and when I was at the academy, I used to room with this fellow named Joel. He was a couple of years younger than me. And I was a senior, he was a sophomore, but he was just so enamored. He was just stuck on this girl there at the academy. She was a couple of years old. She was in my class, actually. And boy, he just wouldn't stop talking about her. He was just so depressed, but he could write some music. And he was all about her. Every song he wrote was about her. And he wanted me to play the rhythm, and he could play the lead. And so, you know what? I just wanted to play with somebody. So I was learning how to play chords. And so, yes. But he was the first one that came to mind after I read that on the interweb. And yes, musicians seem like they're depressed. Even the music before I came back to church, I listened to a lot of 90s rock music, right? A lot of those artists that killed themselves, suicide, they're dead. depression. It's crazy. In fact, that's how I learned how to play. I was playing that type of music before I started playing, spiritual music. Yeah, and things for Pathfinders and for the school. And so a lot of times when you hear me strum when I play guitar, it's kind of have a rock feel to it. That's how I learned. Others have a little bluegrassy or country. Mine's just kind of it's hard to strum the strings. That's how I'm going. That's how I like to do it. But anyway, yes, there were the musicians seemed to be most depressed. And David, speaking of David, was a great poet and a musician because obviously his harp skills are good enough to play in front of the King Saul, right? Let's turn to, if you want to look up, Sandra, Psalm chapter 88, verse 6. Alan, if you could look up Psalm chapter 130, verse 1. Malin, if you could look up Psalms chapter 71. Let's see here. Scroll down there. So we're going to talk about kind of David, how he's just, and I'm sure you've read a lot of Psalms with David before, how he's just saying, Lord, why am I in this situation? The enemy's all around me. I'm afflicted. Please help me. Da-da-da-da-da. He's got highs and lows, and then he's praising God, and maybe later on in the chapter. But it seems like for some reason he's always down in the dumps, it seems like. So Psalm chapter 88, verse 6, Andrew.
You have laid me in the lowest pit, in darkness, in the depths.
Psalm chapter 130, verse 1, Alan.
Lord, I called to you from the depths, hear my cry. Adonai, let your ears pay attention to the sound of my pleading.
In Psalm chapter 49, I'm going to read this from the Quarterly. It says, we found a touching, it's the first paragraph on Tuesday's lesson. In Psalm 49, we find a touching expression of hope in the resurrection, in contrast to the false assurance of the fool who trusts in his wealth. David seeks security and hope from God. Remember, we just read Psalm chapter 49, if you remember, just a few minutes ago. David seeks security and hope from God while surrounded by enemies and false accusers who say that God has forsaken him. So once again, he's just surrounded by his enemies. He's looking for a way out. He knows that God's going to help him. Malachi, read Psalm chapter 71, verse 10, please. Huh? Oh, okay, that's fine. Just read it out. Psalm chapter 71, verse 10.
For my enemies speak against me, and those who lie in wait for my life take counsel together.
So he's definitely, when we look back at the Quarterly here, I'm going to read from the paragraph starts with the expression. The expression from the depths of the earth could be understood literally as an allusion to the future physical resurrection of the psalmist. But the context seems to favor a metaphorical description of David's condition of deep depression, as if the earth was swallowing him. So we could say that it is primarily figure of speech, but also hints at a physical resurrection. So when you read Psalm, I don't think we did that actually. Psalm 71:20 says, "Thou hast shown me great and sore troubles, shall quicken me again or make me alive, and shall bring me again from the depths of the earth." So David, even though he had suffered from depression, even though he had highs and lows, he knew of a hope as well. He knew of the resurrection. He knew that there was something. He knew that God would save him from his troubles, not only at that moment in time when he's surrounded by his enemies, King Saul and his soldiers, but also another time when he's quickened again. He's made alive. Yes, Ellen.
I guess it kind of reminds me of when we were getting ready to move. Right near our house, there was a flower plant, and Lilia pointed out, she said there was a caterpillar about yay big, and we took a picture of it. I still have it on my phone. But I don't know, the imagery I got of the caterpillar is interesting because it takes a while for that caterpillar eat all the leaves that needs to have. And then
Have you ever seen it?
Yeah, and then it's got to be in this cocoon for I don't know how long, but isn't that similar how the Lord works in our lives? He's got to sometimes refresh us from the start, get rid of the things that we think we have to have, and then grow us so that we can eventually become the beautiful butterfly that He wants us to be.
But we don't see that probably at that time, right? We're stuck in our cocoon. We're stuck in our house. I actually.
Yeah, sometimes we think too, like, you're so used to a daily routine, so used to like your everyday life, but then like for us, we completely uprooted our lives here, and I had a struggle with depression back home, and when I came here, it's kind of like a refresh start for me. Mm-hmm. I had just lost my dad last year, and to me, it was just like like a butterfly. You just kind of come out of cocoon and you're just refreshed. You feel relieved. You feel like God is providing a new door, a new window, just for a new outlook on life. And it just kind of really helps you.
Yeah. When the shutdown happened a couple years ago, obviously we were living up north, and we still had church, but there was only literally 3 people at church, and then it was Zoomed.
Yes.
Or maybe YouTube, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then people could watch the whole church service on YouTube. And there was only 3 people. So one of those days I was preaching, and it was on the cocoon. It's interesting. And it talked about how I talked about
Christian cocoon, right?
Christian cocoon, yeah. And I talked about how, we're all closed up. We're all closed up in our homes. But what are we doing in our homes? Are we just playing video games? Are we just watching Hollywood movies? What are we doing? Have we fed? Are we studying? Because we just like this church, that was an active church up there. We were all in the community. We were going out. We were inviting youth to our house all the time, and so we were active. But then all of a sudden, everything stopped. We were all shut, just like the whole world was basically at that time. And I asked everybody. I said, "What are you doing right now in your cocoon? Are you studying? Are you praying? Are you preparing yourself? Because when things open back up, got to hit the pavement, right? The feet got to hit the pavement. We got to keep going, and we have to spread the word, just like we were before. Invite people to our house. COVID's not going to last forever, and praise God, it hasn't. So that's good. So let's go ahead and turn to. Oh, actually, let me read right quick. Speaking about depression, Ellen White says, "When depression settles upon the soul, it is no evidence that God has changed. He is the same yesterday and today and forever. You are sure of the favor of God when you are sensible of the beams of the sun of righteousness. But if the clouds sweep over your soul, you must not feel that you are forsaken. Treasure up the lessons that His love provides. Let your faith be like Job's, that you may declare, though He slay me, yet will I trust in Him. Lay hold on the promises of your Heavenly Father. And remember His former dealing with you and with the servants, for all things work together for good to them that love God." So, just like we need physical health, many of us are suffering from mental health as well. And, to that, Ellen White says, don't be depressed. Think about the ways that God has led you to this point into your life, about the health that you have, about...
even small things, like we see a deer outside our house all the time, and just like, it's nature, like just enjoy nature.
Yeah.
I think that's very hard. It's hard in the moment. I think it was Friday. I was at work, and I was looking at our old house that we left, and then, looking at the new house we're buying, and then I just automatically just started getting depressed. I'm like, man, we left a lot there.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
And then I told Debbie when I got home, I was like, the thing is, when you're in that moment, you really shouldn't stay there too long, because, man, that can really get you down in the dumps.
Yes.
But I was like,
yes.
Oh, man, what am I doing? But, so I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, the first month for me here was like, I'm telling you, it was depression 101, because I moved from a town, that's the only town I ever knew. I was born and raised in the town we were from. And to here, like, you had to use GPS to get everywhere, like... And
even every time we'll go back about once a month. I hesitate, too. I try to stay at my mom's house. My mom still lives there. And I try not to go around town, not because it just, there's... That, to me, that chapter's closed, Just like I went to my alumni, my 25th year reunion, we went 2 weeks ago at the academy. And I told Amy, I said, I'm going to be stepping back in time. There's going to be people seeing that I'm seeing in 25 years or more. And I don't want it to, that chapter's closed. I don't want it to mess with me. So, there's girls obviously I dated back then and stuff like that. I'd rather just not even put it in my head. I just really don't want to go. Amy made me go to the church service, so we went to that. But
I
we
think
took off pretty quick after that.
I think you enjoyed it though, and it was important.
It was, yeah.
It was important to show, like Michaela went with us too. Like, hey, this is where you're gonna eventually go to school. This
Yeah.
is how far your dad's been there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of nice for us to your boss was there too. So
Yeah, my boss was there, so I kind of felt I had to be there. Oh my goodness, it's 10:27. Okay, so we have 3 minutes to get to Wednesdays and Thursdays. No, that's not going to happen. Okay, so I'm just going to finish up, honestly, reading a passage from Ellen White. I thought it was just amazing. As we come to the, we're talking about the hope of the resurrection in the Old Testament. Obviously, we see clearly that this has been something that has not, that the Jesus didn't come up with in the Gospels. This is something that was predicted way back in Genesis 3:15, that there was going to be a hope that Jesus was going to come and save us and redeem us and get us back to the Garden of Eden. She writes in Our High Calling, all heaven is, oh, I read that one already, didn't I?
yeah.
Oh, I didn't. All heaven is looking upon you with deep interest. One soul for whom Christ has died is worth more than the whole world. One soul for whom Christ has died is worth more than the whole world. I wish every young man and woman could appreciate the value of the human soul if they would give themselves to Jesus just as they are, though sinful and polluted. He will accept them the very moment that they give themselves to him. And Jesus will put his spirit in the humble seeker's heart. Whosoever comes to him, he will in no wise cast out. You may love Jesus with your whole heart, and he will never disappoint that love and confidence. Our parents may disappoint us, our kids may disappoint us, our work, our job, our grocery store may disappoint us, not having what we're wanting. Jesus will not disappoint us. He will be our hope always. Just keep that in mind. And there will be times when we're thinking, man, what is going on with my life? I'm getting depressed, things happen, cars break down. Things happen. Never forget, Jesus will not disappoint you. Let's bow our heads for prayer. Our Father in heaven, Lord, I thank you so much for us coming together, talking and sharing stories, Lord. Father, I just ask that you would put within our hearts continually put our hearts that hope every day, Lord, because it's so easy just to throw our hands up in the air and just say, Lord, I give up. But we can't give up. Lord, you created us. You redeemed us. We are worth something. Our soul is worth more than the whole world. One soul is. Lord, I ask that we will go through this new week, that we will tell someone about you. Lord, help us to finish your work up so we can go home. We're tired. We're weary. It's my prayer in Christ's name. Amen.